The morning smelled like rain-wet stone and bruised marigolds, which meant it was a Thursday, which meant Myra Voss had been alive another week. She set the first bucket of flowers on the cracked Duracrete lip of her stall and listened to the market wake up around her, the groan of iron shutters, the hiss of a protein cart venting steam, the distant clank of the transit lifts carrying the first shift workers down from the mid-ring towers. Threshold Station's Lower Agora was not a beautiful place. It smelled of recycled air and fried fat, and the particular sweetness of alien produce going soft in its bins. But it was loud, and loud meant anonymous, and anonymous had kept Myra Voss breathing for 6 years. She arranged the flowers the way her mother had taught her, tall stems at the back, color gradients front to center, the small ones you couldn't sell alone tucked into bundles with ribbon, so their weakness became abundance. Her mother had been talking about flowers when she said that. Myra had always suspected she meant something else. Morning Voss. Don Kovac dropped his transit badge on her counter the way he did every Thursday, not buying anything, just announcing himself, the way a large dog announces itself by sitting in the middle of a room. He was a threshold peacekeeping sergeant, built like someone had stacked 3 smaller men and fused them together, with a face that looked like it had been used to stop several fast-moving objects over the years. His uniform was regulation gray. His jacket collar was always 1 button shy of correct, and he had been stationed in the Lower Agora for 4 years without ever once being assigned somewhere better, which either meant he had done something wrong early in his career or had actively refused promotion. Myra had never asked which. "Morning," she said. He picked up a stem of something purple and examined it with the intense focus of a man who knew absolutely nothing about flowers but felt that pretending to look was polite. He set it down. "You hear about the census ping last night?" Myra's hands kept moving, ribbon, bundle cut. "I heard the lights flickered." More than flickered. Conclave ran a full biometric registration sweep. Whole station 12 seconds. He paused. "They're looking for something. They're always looking for something. They're looking for somebody." She glanced up at him then, just briefly, just long enough to make the look mean nothing. "Somebody from where?" she said. Kovac shrugged. He picked up the purple stem again, put it back down again. Posted notice said legacy bloodline verification, treaty compliance, something about incomplete registry entries from the Culling-era census. He watched her hands. "You sleep through the ping okay?" "Like a rock," Myra said. She finished the bundle, tied it off. Her hands were steady. She had spent 6 years making sure her hands were always steady. The Conclave Census Office occupied a converted docking bay 3 levels above the Agora, staffed by 2 Velthari administrators and a human data clerk who looked like she had not made a decision that mattered in many years. Myra went at midday, when the queue was shortest. She wore her market clothes, canvas jacket, worn boots, hair pulled back in a way that said laborer rather than refugee rather than anything else. She filed a routine residency renewal. She gave her registered name. She pressed her palm to the scanner. The Velthari administrator looked at the screen, then at her palm, then at the screen again. "Can you repeat your full designation?" it said. The Velthari spoke in the flat, whistling tones of their species, translated in real time by the room's language processor into something between a whisper and a sigh. "Myra Voss," she said. "Market vendor, Lower Agora, stall 9. Secondary designation." "I don't have one." The administrator looked at the screen for a long time. Its 4 upper eyes blinked in the slow, staggered rhythm that meant processing rather than confusion, though with Velthari you could never be entirely certain. "Your biometric signature," it said carefully, "has returned a classification flag." Myra said nothing. The flag indicates a legacy sequence associated with a dissolved bloodline registry, the Moonfang Orcan clan. officially deregistered under the Galactic Conclave's Consolidation Charter 47 Galactic Standard years ago. It paused. The charter included a terminal census order. All surviving members were registered, classified, and it paused again in a way that clearly meant it was choosing a word: resolved. "I'm aware of what the charter included," Myra said. The administrator's upper eyes blinked again, slower this time. "Your file indicates no surviving relatives," it said. "No clan affiliation, no legacy claim." "That's correct. And yet your biometric signature carries the Moonfang Heiress sequence at full hereditary density." Myra waited. "We will need," the administrator said very quietly, "to flag this for senior review." She walked out, not fast, not slow. She walked the way she had learned to walk in 6 years of being nobody, at the pace of a person with nothing interesting to do next. She was back at the stall by 2 in the afternoon. Kavak was there. He wasn't supposed to be there at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. He was leaning against the Duracrete post to the left of her buckets, watching the transit lifts with the casual attention of a man who had decided to be somewhere for a reason he wasn't going to name first. Myra sat down behind her counter. She pulled out the afternoon's unsold stock and began stripping the damaged petals, an automatic task, the kind of task your hands could do while the rest of you thought about something else. "You went to the census office," Kavak said, "not a question. Residency renewal. They flagged you." She kept stripping petals. "You're in conclave databases now. I'm in the station alert system. Any flag in my district, I hear it." He turned to look at her. "Myra, what's a Moonfang Heiress sequence?" The market moved around them. A family of Drenathi children ran past trailing something bright. The protein cart vented another plume of steam. Somewhere deeper in the Agra, someone was playing music on a cheap handheld speaker, something with too much percussion and not enough melody, the kind of thing that filled space without meaning to fill it. Myra set down a stripped stem. She picked up another one. "It's a bloodline marker," she said. "Orc clans encode hereditary data into their cellular structure. Leadership lines carry a specific sequence denser than common clan markings. It gets passed down the direct line." She paused. Moonfang was one of the 7 great Orc clans before the consolidation. The Conclave spent 11 years dismantling the clan system. The Moonfang were last. Their leadership line was, she turned a stem in her fingers, resolved. Kavak was quiet for a moment. "But you're here," he said. "I'm a market vendor." "Myra." She looked at him. "You've been here 4 years," he said. "I've watched you work every Thursday. You arrange those flowers the same way every single morning. You've never been late. You've never missed a shift. You've never done anything that would make anyone look at you twice. And I've been looking at you twice every Thursday for 4 years. And I couldn't tell you why until about an hour ago when I pulled your flag, and the census algorithm kicked back a heritance density score that puts you in the 99th percentile of a bloodline that's supposed to be extinct." He leaned forward slightly. "So I'm going to ask you one more time. What is a Moonfang Heiress sequence?" Myra held the flower stem. It was something pale and yellow, a cutting from a station greenhouse that would never have grown anywhere natural. Her mother would have had a name for it. Her mother had a name for everything that grew. "It means," she said, "that I'm the last." The man who came to her stall at dusk was not Conclave. She knew that before he spoke, before she saw the mark on the inside of his left wrist, before he said a single word. She knew it the way she knew weather was coming, something in the quality of the air around him, something in the way he moved like a man who had spent a long time being careful. He was old, or cold, which meant something different than human old, the kind of weathering that happened to stone rather than skin. His head was shaved except for 2 gray-white strips above his ears in the old warrior style, and his hands had been through more than she wanted to estimate. He looked at her for a long time without speaking. Then he said, in Old Tongue Orc, not the trade pidgin, the real language, the one her mother had spoken, "Lady." Myra felt something move through her, that she had been working very hard not to feel for 6 years. "Don't," she said in the same language. "I'm not don't." "Myra of the Voss secondary house," he said, "firstborn to the Moonfang Orc primary line, verified heiress of the 7th great clan under the clan charter of the Galactic Consolidation's own records." "I sell flowers," she said. Her voice was very flat. She had practiced that flatness. "You sell flowers," he agreed. He placed both hands palm up on her counter. The gesture was formal, ancient. It was the submission posture of a senior clansman before a direct heir. "And I have been looking for you for 11 years. His name was Gorath. He had been the Moonfang clan's last official cartographer. He had survived the Consolidation's resolution campaign by being in the wrong sector at the right time, a navigational error that had marooned him on a dead relay station for 9 months while the Conclave assumed he was among the resolved. He had been searching for survivors since. He had found 2 others in 11 years. The other was sitting in the Agora now, watching from 3 stalls down, an old woman with a scar that ran from her left ear to her jaw, her head dipped over a card game she wasn't playing. The old honor guard. "There are 3 of us," Gorath said. "There were 9,640. Myra sat with that number for a moment. "What do you want from me?" she said. "Nothing." His voice was gentle and completely without softness, which was an orc thing she had forgotten how to feel without it hurting. "What I want is irrelevant. What the charter requires is a different matter. The charter is a conclave document designed to erase us." "The same charter that erased us," Gorath said, "contains a restoration clause, a provision the conclave drafters inserted because galactic law requires it. Any bloodline eliminated by conclave action that can prove survival of a primary line heir, in full heritance density, within the statute window, is entitled to formal restoration under the Treaty of Common Peoples." He paused. "The statute window closes in 9 days. Myra looked at him. "What does restoration require?" she said, though she was beginning to understand why she wasn't going to like the answer. "A public declaration," he said. "A registered heir must name herself, aloud, before a quorum of the Galactic Forum, with biometric verification on the public record." He placed something on the counter between them, a flat disc of dark metal, old clanwork, the Moonfang sigil pressed into its face. "The Conclave's entire case for the dissolution rests on the assumption that there is no one left to contest it." "If I declare myself," Myra said, "everything I've built here ends," he said. "Yes. Everything I've protected ends." He did not look away. "But you are alive, lady. And you are the only reason the Moonfang are not a footnote." She stared at the disc. She did not touch it. "Come back tomorrow," she said. She did not sleep. She sat in the back room of the stall, which was not really a room. It was a sectioned-off space behind a curtain, barely large enough for a cot and a locker and the smell of tomorrow's flowers soaking in their water buckets. She had lived in smaller. She had lived in worse. She turned the clan disc over in her hands in the dark. Her mother had been the primary heir. Myra had been born to a secondary house, a cousin line, which was why she had survived the consolidation. She had been young and unregistered and far from the center of anything. She had been 8 years old when the Conclave's consolidation fleet arrived at the Moonfang home system. She had been on a transport with her mother's cousin, heading toward a border market on a routine supply run, when the fleet's census pulse swept through and rewrote everything. Her mother had been attending a clan council, the last one. The thing Myra had spent 6 years keeping locked away was not grief. Grief, she had made her peace with the way you make your peace with a scar. You feel it, you accommodate it, you stop expecting the feeling to end. What she had locked away was something older than grief, something that had no clean name in any language she spoke. It was the sound of her mother's voice singing the clan mourning hymn. It was something ancient and specific in hers, and the locking of it had required years of practice and work, and the deliberate architecture of a life that left no room for it. She sang the hymn now, quietly, in the dark, in Old Tongue Orc, the real words, the ones that talked about stone and sky and water finding its way regardless. She did not hear Kavek arrive, but she heard him stop moving outside the curtain when she started singing. She didn't stop. When she finished, there was a long silence. "That's old," Kavek said, from the other side of the curtain. His voice was careful and quiet in a way she hadn't heard before. 700 years, she said. Minimum, possibly older. Another silence. "I'm not going to pretend I understand what's happening," he said. "But I've got 2 years left on my Agra posting, and approximately 0 desire to watch someone I've known for 4 years get processed by a conclave census resolution team. So if there's something I can do, tell me now." Myra held the disc in both hands. "There's a galactic forum session in 8 days, she said. "Standing open quorum. Any registered entity can file for floor recognition under the Treaty of Common Peoples." She paused. "I need to get there, and I need to get there as myself, not as Myra Voss, market vendor." "How far is Forum Station?" 11 hours by fast transit." "I can get you on a peacekeeping transfer vessel," he said. "No manifest flags because it's internal transfer, not passenger registry. We leave tomorrow, we get there in time." Another pause. "I'll need to call in a favor that I was saving for something else." "What were you saving it for?" A long beat. "Honestly, I was going to use it to get reassigned to a station with better food." She heard him shift his weight. "But flowers and better food are both technically agricultural, so I'm going to tell myself this is thematically consistent." Myra sat in the dark with the disc and the smell of tomorrow's flowers. She had built this life out of silence and invisibility and the deliberate smallness of taking up no space. She had been good at it. She had been very good at it. And she understood, sitting in the back of a flower stall at the edge of a station that didn't care whether she existed, that the one thing she had never once considered was that being good at disappearing was not the same as being safe. She had kept herself alive. She had kept herself hidden. And in doing so she had kept the last thin thread of something 9,639 people had died for from going dark entirely. Her mother had been singing the morning hymn when the conclave fleet arrived. Myra knew this because the courier who had survived had told her, years later, that the last thing the station audio logs had picked up before the census pulse was a woman's voice, Old Tongue Orc, the morning hymn. She had kept singing, right up until the end. Myra put the disc around her neck. "We leave at dawn," she said. Kavek's favor bought them a berth on a peacekeeping fast transport running a supply route through the forum corridor. The crew were human, 2 of them, and they asked no questions after Kavek said a word to them privately that Myra didn't hear, and she had decided years ago not to ask about categories of human competence she didn't fully understand. They traveled in a converted cargo section that smelled of engine seal and old ration packaging. Goreth sat in the corner and slept with the efficiency of an old soldier who had learned to sleep when sleep was possible rather than when it was comfortable. The honor guard, her name was Sira, and the scar across her jaw was an old blade mark, pre-consolidation, from something she hadn't explained and Myra hadn't asked, spent the 11 hours doing something with her hands that Myra gradually realized was repair work on a set of old clan ceremonial bracers. Scratched, dented, mostly decorative. Still intact. Kavek sat across from Myra and did not talk much, which she found unexpectedly companionable. At hour 7, somewhere in the transit corridor between stations, he said, "What happens if the forum refuses recognition?" "They can't refuse the filing," Myra said. The treaty doesn't allow it. They can dispute the biometric verification contest that I'm actually primary line rather than secondary line. They can challenge the heritance density reading. They can argue that the restoration clause was superseded by subsequent charters. She paused. They'll almost certainly try all three. Can they win? The Conclave has 11 years of resources and 600 years of institutional practice at making things mean what they want them to mean. She looked at the wall rather than at him. But the heritance sequence doesn't lie. Biometric data is the one thing the Conclave trusts absolutely, because it's the thing they built their entire system on. And mine reads at full primary line density. She paused again. My mother made sure of that. How? Myra turned the disk in her hands. Before the fleet arrived, while the council was still in session, she registered a primary line transfer. It's normally a ceremony takes days. She did it in about 4 minutes in a room that was shaking from the first census pulses. She stopped. She would have known what it meant. The transfer makes the recipient the primary heir. The primary heir is the priority target for the resolution campaign. She kept her voice flat. It required work. She gave me her sequence and then she went back into the council chamber. The transport hummed. Stars moved behind the small porthole above Kavek's shoulder. I'm sorry, he said. The words were plain and direct and did not try to do more than they could do, and she found she was grateful for that. She would have liked flowers, Myra said. She grew things, food plants mostly on the clan grounds. But she kept a section near the eastern wall that was just things that were beautiful. She managed something that was almost a smile. She said the Conclave's worst error was that they had no philosophy of the unnecessary. She said that anything a civilization deemed worth keeping purely because it was beautiful was a civilization that understood what it was for. Kavek was quiet for a while. I think, he said, that she would have been correct. Forum Station was everything the lower Agra was not: vast, clean, deliberate in its geometry, built to impress rather than to function, which meant it functioned poorly and impressed everyone who had never had to live in it. The outer ring was conclave administrative space. The inner ring was the forum chamber itself, a sphere of tiered galleries and floating translation platforms that could seat 3,000 delegates, and had been built to look as though the galaxy's entire history were watching whatever happened inside it. Goreth had the filing documents. He had been carrying them for 11 years. They walked in through the public gallery entrance, which the treaty guaranteed to any registered citizen of any member species, and Myra had filed as Myra Voss, which she still technically was. The forum's recognition process required only that you be present and that you file at the public kiosk before the open session began. The kiosk did not check bloodlines. It only checked that you had a heartbeat and a registered identity. The floor representative accepted the filing with the slightly pained expression of an administrative functionary encountering something unexpected during what should have been a routine session. He took the documents to the floor coordinator. The floor coordinator took them to the session chair. The session chair spent 4 minutes reading, stopped, read again, and then looked up at the public gallery with an expression that Myra recognized. She had seen it on the census administrator's face, on the translation algorithm that had briefly stuttered when Goreth said her bloodline name aloud, on the conclave aide who had been standing in the hall outside the census office when she walked out. The expression of a system encountering data it had classified as impossible. The session chair called the open floor. Myra stood. The gallery went quiet before she was halfway to the floor, which surprised her. She had expected noise, objections, procedural challenges, the bureaucratic obstruction of people who had been comfortable with things as they were. There was noise, but the quiet came first. She reached the floor dais. The translation platforms adjusted automatically, feeding her voice in real time to every species in the chamber. She pressed her palm to the verification pad. The biometric reader took 7 seconds, longer than normal, long enough that she heard the soft mechanical sound of it running the sequence twice. Then it chimed, and the display above the dais lit up with the heritance data, rendered in the conclave's own notation, in numbers the conclave's own cartographers had designed. She looked up at the gallery. 3,000 faces, approximately, looking down at her. Velthari, Drenathi, 4 species she didn't have names for, humans and the conclave administrative staff in their tier, who were already conferring in the rapid, overlapping way of people scrambling to find a procedure they hadn't prepared for. She thought about her mother. She thought about the morning hymn, and the eastern wall with the flowers that served no function except beauty, and the 4 minutes in a shaking council chamber, and what it costs a person to give away the one thing that makes them a target so that someone else can survive. She thought about 6 years of careful, practiced invisibility, the discipline of smallness, the daily work of taking up no space. She was done with that. "My name," she said, and her voice through the translation platforms filled the sphere in every language simultaneously, "is Myra of the Moonfang primary line. I am the verified primary heir of the 7th Great Orc clan. The Moonfang clan was dissolved by conclave action 47 standard years ago under the Consolidation Charter. The resolution campaign that followed killed 9,639 members of my people." She paused, not for effect but because some numbers need a moment of room around them. Under Article 17 of the Treaty of Common Peoples, the dissolution of any people by conclave action does not constitute their extinction if a verified primary line heir survives within the statute window. I am that heir. I am standing here. The window has not closed. And I am filing for formal restoration of the Moonfang clan, under the full rights afforded by the treaty that this forum claims to uphold. The conclave administrative tier erupted. The session chair gavelled for order. Several delegates in the lower gallery were already on their feet. The translation platforms were carrying 12 simultaneous reactions, and somehow conveying all of them. Myra stood at the dais and let it happen. Gorath was in the public gallery. She could see him from the dais, just his silhouette in the 3rd tier, still and straight, the way very old soldiers stand when something they stopped believing in arrives anyway. Sira was next to him. She had the ceremonial bracers in her hands. Kavak was at the gallery railing, which he had been gripping since she started speaking, and he was not looking at the conclave administrators or the erupting delegates or the session chair trying to restore order. He was looking at her, with the expression of a man who has been watching something for a long time without knowing what it was, and has just now understood. The session chair called for the biometric challenge that Myra had predicted. The conclave's advocate rose and cited 3 procedural objections, all prepared, all reasonable on their surface, all completely useless against data, that the conclave's own systems had just confirmed in their own notation on a screen that everyone in the chamber could read. The debate took 4 hours. Myra stood through most of it. At the end, the session chair called the recognition vote. It passed. Not unanimously. The conclave's allied delegates held their votes, and 2 Velthari administrative representatives abstained with expressions suggesting they expected to hear from their superiors shortly. But the treaty delegates voted. The independent observers voted. And enough of the full membership voted that the recognition carried the minimum required threshold by a margin that could not be challenged under the forum's own rules, because the forum's own rules were the thing the conclave had built, and they had built them to be unassailable, and they had never imagined that the thing the rules would protect, one day, was the last person they expected. The gavel came down. The Moonfang clan was formally recognized. She found Gorath and Sira in the gallery corridor afterward, in the controlled chaos of delegates and administrators moving in many directions at once with the urgent energy of people who had just been surprised by history and needed to tell someone about it. Gorath pressed both palms together and inclined his head. The formal gesture, the elder-to-heir submission. She had been refusing it since the Agra. She let him do it this time. Sira fastened the ceremonial bracers onto Myra's wrists without asking, with the efficient tenderness of someone who had been waiting 11 years to complete that specific task, and Myra stood still and let her. "What happens now?" Myra asked. "There will be negotiations," Gorath said. "The conclave will contest the scope of restoration. There will be territory disputes, asset claims, historical documentation. It will take years." "Good," Myra said. "I've got time." "There are other survivors," Sira said. Her voice was low and even. "We have found 11 in 3 years. With formal recognition, with the registry open again, there will be more." She paused. "They will come to you." Myra looked down at the bracers on her wrists, scratched and dented and still intact. Kavek appeared from the corridor crowd, slightly out of breath in the way of a large man who had been moving faster than his stride, preferred through a space that hadn't been designed for it. "You could have warned me that was going to take 4 hours, he said. "I didn't know it would take 4 hours." "You could have guessed." "I could have guessed," she allowed. He stood beside her in the corridor, and they watched the chaos of the forum's aftermath moving around them. Administrators with documents, delegates with urgent communiques, the occasional pair of Velthari moving with the slow deliberation of people who were extremely upset and had decided to be extremely dignified about it. "So," Kavek said, "what does a restored clan heir do on a Tuesday?" "I genuinely don't know," Myra said. "I've been a flower vendor for 6 years." "There are worse skill sets," he considered. "The Agra stall is technically still registered to you until the end of the quarter." "I know." "I was going to suggest," he said, with the careful tone of someone approaching something they had been thinking about for longer than this conversation, "that formal or not, a clan heir navigating conclave bureaucracy for the next several years might benefit from someone who knows how station systems work and has a moderately impressive collection of favors left to call in." "You said you only had the one." "I said I was saving one. I didn't say it was the only one." Myra looked at him. "You'd leave the Agra posting," she said. "I told you the food is terrible." She was quiet for a moment. The bracers were heavier than they looked. Not uncomfortably so, just present, in the way that things with meaning are present, so that you can feel them even when you aren't thinking about them. "The morning hymn," she said, "the one you heard." Kavek said nothing. "My mother sang it every day. She said it was for the growing things. She said plants know when someone is paying attention to them, not believing it literally, just meaning that intention matters, that showing up matters, that the daily practice of caring about something keeps it alive." She looked at the bracers. 6 years ago I told myself I was just surviving, just getting through, but I kept buying seeds. I kept arranging the flowers the same way she taught me. She stopped. "I kept singing it, just to myself in the dark. Every morning." Kavek was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah," he said, "I know." She turned to face the forum corridor, the chaos and the noise and the new thing that was just beginning. Gorath was behind her. Sira was behind her. 11 survivors somewhere in the galaxy, and more to come, all of them following the thin thread she had kept alive by being exactly small enough to survive, and then, at the last possible moment, exactly large enough to matter. She had spent 6 years building a life that left no room for what she was. She found there was plenty of room. She just hadn't been looking in the right place. Outside the forum station's outer ring, the stars were doing what they always did, burning quietly at enormous distance, indifferent to treaties and resolutions, and the formal recognition of things that had been told they no longer existed. But they burned. They kept burning. Not because anyone asked them to, not because it was recorded anywhere, but because that was what they were, and being what you are is the oldest and most stubborn form of resistance there is. Myra of the Moonfang put her hand over the disc at her throat and walked forward,